Well, it's back. The franchise that runs entirely on 80s style testosterone is back in the theater, this time with a much larger cast and honestly a pretty good villain. I am of course talking about The Expendables 3. The plot of this one this time around is Sylvester Stallone and his team of Expendables played by Jason Statham, Randy Couture, Terry Crews, Dolph Lundgren, and to a confusingly lesser extent Jet Li, goes to rescue Wesley Snipes from a prison, and all seems to be going well. However, in a subsequent mission, they come across an old enemy of Stallone's named Conrad Stonebanks, played by Mel Gibson. And Stonebanks had actually been one of the founding members of the Expendables. Him and Barney were good friends once. However, things went bad years back, and Stonebanks, presumed dead, has since become an arms dealer. So Barney, in an effort to save them from possible collateral damage, cuts ties with his old team and forms a new team of young, reckless rookies. And this sets the stage for the old guys to come charging in at the end and save the day while working together with the new guys. Now, like I said, this one boasts a much larger cast this time around. Not only do you have the group of Expendables that I just mentioned, but like I said, you have Mel Gibson as the bad guy. And among the new Expendables, or the new members to the cast, you have Antonio Banderas, you have Kelsey Grammer, and the young guys are played by Kellen Lutz, Victor Ortiz, who else? Glenn Powell is one of them. He's the tech-savvy expert. And then you have MMA fighter Rowdy Ronda Rousey, who I think is actually the first female Expendable, if you don't count the Asian chick from the second one. But I suppose I should really start by giving my thoughts on the previous ones. The first Expendables movie back in 2010, I didn't hate, but I didn't really think it was all that great. Granted, I know these movies are not technically meant to be good. They're supposed to be kind of crummy. But I thought the first one just really had somewhat of an identity crisis and somewhat of an inconsistent tone. In my opinion, it didn't really know what it wanted to be completely. The second one I liked, even though I acknowledge that one is ridiculously cheesy. Right down to the really crappy one-liners and callbacks to the actor's previous movies. So when this one rolled around, I was looking forward to it, yeah, because I like anyone, or at least any sane person, would be looking forward to anything that acts as a faithful callback to the old 80s style action movies and action movie tropes, and like legions of other movie fans, I'm one of the guys who delights in seeing Sylvester Stallone work with Arnold Schwarzenegger and all these guys come together, like Jet Li, Statham, Mel Gibson, Antonio Banderas, Kelsey Grammer, Harrison Ford this time around. So yeah, I've always been all for the premise of these movies. Now, the execution, I could take or leave. Like I said, I'm much more of a casual fan of these movies, considering their look. I know they are not exactly meant to be award-winning movies. Like I said, they are meant to be stupid. However, the law of diminishing returns, I think, somewhat applies to this entry. The Expendables 3, first problem with it, it's PG-13. Now, I'm not saying PG-13 sequels to R-rated movies is necessarily a bad thing in terms of concept on paper, because, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome was good, and it was PG-13, right on the heels of the two R-rated Mad Max movies that came before it. But this, which is supposed to be an homage to the numerous hard R 80s and 90s movies that these guys previously did, and and for them to suddenly pull a modern day action movie stunt and water it down to a PG-13 in the hopes of gaining a wider audience, I think actually contradicts the point of the franchise, and that's not the only time that this movie contradicts itself. But how is the PG-13 rating? Honestly, it's sometimes it's noticeable, but a lot of the time it it's not really all that distracting. I mean the times when you see the Expendables just shooting hundreds of nameless henchmen off in the distance, that's fine. I could take or leave the blood on that one. The lack of f bombs, I think, is made up for the most part with or by the numerous other swear words. Um, However, when you have Wesley Snipes and Jason Statham cutting people up with knives, which is their weapon of choice, I'm sorry, you have to have at least one drop of blood. You cannot have people getting carved up with knives and have it be PG-13, completely bloodless. Um, and when you take movies like this, which are basically stemming from hard R franchises, and make them PG-13, and purposely water the action down, whether it be by editing or just by how you film it, then old school fans tend to get angry. I mean, I don't care if you're aiming for a wider audience. Your primary audience should be the people who followed this string of films or this style of films from the beginning. And like I said, it seems like somewhat of a contradiction. Um, will this thing get an R-rated release on DVD or an unrated cut? I don't know, possibly. I don't really like to speculate about those things too much. But Terminator Salvation was PG-13, and it later got an R-rated cut on Blu-ray. Same with Live Free or Die Hard. So it's possible, especially considering that this thing was purposely edited down from an R. But, I'm done talking about that. The acting, first of all, this one has the best villain of the entire franchise. Mel Gibson is so freaking awesome in this movie. Um, because he is one of the only quote unquote, or not even quote unquote, he is one of the only genuinely good actors in this movie. I mean, him, Kelsey Grammer, Jet Li, Harrison Ford, these are some of the only genuinely good actors in this movie, and possibly Jason Statham. All the rest of them are just your kind of standard action movie heroes. You don't really go to guys like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger to have them perform Shakespeare or give this really deep dramatic performance. You go to see them shoot people, and they do that relatively well, and they don't really mix up that formula here. I mean, the guys like Stallone, Snipes, Couture, Cruz, all these guys, I don't want to say they go through the motions, because they do try, but they do what they seem to do best, which is just be action heroes. So if you're looking for that from them, you will get what you pay for. Um, and like, but when you have guys like Kelsey Grammer and Mel Gibson in this movie, just completely blowing them out of the water in terms of performance, it is a little jarring, I will admit. However, Mel Gibson, he's sadistically funny. He can be menacing, and I was actually surprised at how good he was, considering it was a PG-13, and especially considering how similar his character here is to his Martin Riggs character from the Lethal Weapon movies. Think of Martin Riggs, but a little older and without that kind of moral code and without any sense of authority or any loyalty to any higher power, and that's basically what Mel Gibson is in this movie. So yeah, he's pretty intense. He makes for a pretty good bad guy. Like I said, the guys in charge of giving the action movie one-liners and doing the action scenes, they do a really good job at what they do. Aside from a few goofy lines that feel really almost pandering, like Schwarzenegger says, "Get to the chopper." But yeah, the action itself is staged well enough. However, where this movie really falls apart is basically anything involving the kids. The younger Expendables, the newer rookie members. Again, going back to the whole contradiction uh, the whole contradiction point I was making earlier. You're taking what basically defines your franchise, which is a gathering of all these old school action heroes, and you're basically sidelining them and going for this new younger team. Now, with a better script, then this might have worked okay. You could have had this cool contrast or commentary between modern day action movies, the majority of which are PG 13, unfortunately, and old school action movies, which were not afraid to go for the hard R rating with numerous amounts of blood. I mean, I'm talking RoboCop. I'm talking, I'm talking Lethal Weapon. I'm talking Die Hard. Um, I'm talking Commando. Commando was a goofy movie, but at least it was rated R to the to the best of my memory. Even Lethal Weapon 4 was rated R, and Lethal Weapon 4 is when the franchise got really weenie. Um, but but yeah, these kids, none of them are exactly master actors. I mean, Kellen Lutz and Victor Ortiz are they're fine at looking fairly like they know what they're doing in combat. Ronda Rousey, not quite as intense as Gina Carano, but at least she looks a little bit more comfortable on camera, and she is utilized physically in the fight scenes. But and Glenn Powell, just I don't even think he gets many lines, and that's the problem. That's actually one of the fundamental problems with this movie, is that they have so many characters to balance, that they have to balance here, that a lot of these characters are really relegated to cameos. For example, Terry Crews actually gets unfairly sidelined. I mean, he's wounded early on in the movie, and he doesn't wake up until toward the end. Um, and that, combined with the fact that these newer members don't really have much in the way of personality, aside from the opening introductory montage where Stallone is going around recruiting them, that's about it in terms of character development for them. Which leads the middle of this movie to be kind of boring, because it's basically Stallone palling around with these young guys who he can't really speak on equal ground with. I mean, when the times when this movie is good is when Stallone is talking to the other members of the Expendables, like Jason Statham, Dolph Lundgren, Randy Couture, Terry Crews, and even his communications with Harrison Ford, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Mel Gibson. I mean, that's when this movie is good, and when I was really getting invested in and I was really enjoying myself. Um, basically, these kids drag down the movie. Um, but like I said, I don't want to rag too much on this movie, because like I said, to an extent it gives you what you're asking for. It does have this huge cast of characters, and they are utilized at some point or other in the movie. Except for Kelsey Grammer. I don't think Kelsey Grammer gets to kill anyone, which is a shame in a movie like this. But and not all of the humor works. I'm not gonna lie, it's not quite as on the nose as Expendables 2 was. Expendables 2, Chuck Norris showed up just to tell Chuck Norris jokes. Um, here, here it's a little bit more pulled back in terms of oh, get it, get it, get it. For for example, there's this one part where Wesley Snipes is first rescued, and he's kind of introducing what his deal is. His name is Dr. Death, and Jason Statham's character is named Christmas, Lee Christmas. So considering Wesley Snipes is older, and he was a member of the Expendables before Statham, and they both have a knife as their weapon of choice, Snipes basically calls himself the knife before Christmas. Okay, that's dumb, but I'll give that to you. That got a chuckle out of me. But yeah, this is a very mixed package. And I think if they want to do another one of these, then I really think they're going to have to step up their game in terms of dramatic material, and maybe excise the kids, go back to the R rating. I mean, forget about getting a wider audience, because really anyone who's going to see this movie knows what they're in for, or at least presumably knows what they're in for. They know the age range that it's supposed to target. So yeah, just go back to the R rating. But like I said, the acting is at worst it's your standard action movie type of acting like Stallone and Schwarzenegger give, and at best you get a really good villain out of Mel Gibson. Um, so the acting overall is pretty solid for this type of movie. The action is shot well enough, with only a few distracting instances of the blatant PG-13 violence. There's not really any shaky cam that I can think of. It's just that middle portion that really drags this movie down. Um, and and yeah, like I said, some characters really get shortchanged. Like Jet Li is once again robbed of the screen time he deserves. But yeah, overall, I mostly had a good time in this movie. Is it as good as the second one? Probably not. Are fans of the franchise going to flock behind this one like they did with the other ones? Um, you know what? I'm not really sure. I definitely think there are positive aspects to this movie. Um, and I think they are enough to at least justify a discount matinee price, if not a full-on rental. Um, yeah, that's really all I got. Like I said, it's a very mixed package, which might actually lead some people to be underwhelmed by this one, considering all of the fantastic blockbusters that we've gotten this summer. Ranging from Godzilla to X-Men: Days of Future Past to Edge of Tomorrow, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Guardians of the Galaxy, and then we have Expendables 3, which, like I said, is very mixed. Um, so yeah, I sort of recommend it, but if you just don't like any of these other Expendables movies, then get out now. You're not gonna like this movie. Um, yeah, that's about all I got. And hasta la vista, baby.